Hare Krishna. Welcome to our channel, Bhagavad-gita. Here it is, because we have Bhagavad-gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and my name is Bhagavad-gita. We are coming towards the end of chapter 13, where we get to understand things a bit better than we did before. Stay with us.
Shri Guru Shri Juta Padakamalang.
So here we are, reading our favorite Bhagavad-gita, and verse by verse. It's important when we read that we get an idea of the bigger picture, but it's also important to take the time to try and read every verse in it, because all those verses together does comprise the bigger picture. And sometimes we see that there are some presentation that have kind of dipped into one area, and then Bhagavad-gita is all about karma, or Bhagavad-gita is all about dharma. Bhagavad-gita is actually all about bhakti, but in order to understand bhakti properly, then we get the dharma, and we get the yoga, and we get next chapter we're going to hear about the three modes of material nature. So there are all kinds of things. And today we have one text, which is text 28. Samang sarveshu bhuteshu tishtang tang parameshwaram vinashyat sva vinasyantang ya pasyati sa pasyati. Samam, equally, sarvam, in all, bhutishu, living entities. So there we hear it. One who sees the super soul accompanying the individual soul in all bodies, and who understand that neither the soul nor the super soul within the destructible body is ever destroyed, actually sees. So yes, that vision, we don't really get it by looking with our eyes. We get it by hearing. Because some people are very intuitive, and some people have a very highly developed spiritual vision. So that of course is possible, but in general we start to see by hearing. I know when I was young they were kind of making this kind of stories where they made fun of people who were not from the developed countries, and then the first time they saw an airplane or the first time they saw a can of Coca-Cola, they tended to worship them. Now I don't think that's what happened, but it is a fact that the first time you see an airplane or a can of Coca-Cola, you don't know how it got there, you don't know how it works. It seems to be something very strange. Just like nowadays we also see things that we don't understand, but when they are of a technological nature, then we can usually read about them or study about them, and then we can understand them to some extent. So similarly with spiritual vision, especially I would say especially now, but maybe that's not true. Maybe it's always like that. But now at least is the time what I'm familiar with. And we see that around us, so many people who make these comments that, oh, religion, that's for primitive people who didn't know better. Now we know everything. Yeah, because we know medicine, and we know technology, and we have engineers who can build things and construct things, and then we have philosophers who can deconstruct things, and they find there is nothing there, but we can make life work for us because there's so much to do, so we can forget about the fact that nothing is real or nothing is important. And then they feel so superior to these primitive people who have something to believe in, because they consider it a kind of weakness. But actually in this world, to be ignorant of something doesn't make you better. It is of course it's we have the free will. We can choose not to pick up spiritual subjects, and we can choose to focus our life on that which we can touch with our hands and experience straight ahead of us. That is of course there, but for the rest of us who choose differently, we want to understand what's behind the material surface that we see. We come to Bhagavad-gita. And by hearing how Krishna is giving Arjuna this knowledge, we come a little closer to that knowledge ourselves, because the soul, we can't exactly see the soul, but we can understand the symptoms of the soul, we can understand life, we can understand consciousness, and we can also actually clearly see that there's no other scientific discipline that can explain consciousness. When we deal with consciousness, obviously we're all conscious, and that's what we have to deal with within, well, all the fields really, because whatever we can perceive, we can perceive it, we can measure it with our instruments, but we can perceive it, somebody who sees it, only when we're conscious. And then we come to the more subtle realms of, psychology, so on. Understanding ourselves, understanding the people we deal with, that is not a science as such. So here we hear about how the body is destructible and the soul is not destructible. It is eternal, and super soul is eternal too. And let's hear what Prabhupada has to say about this. Purport. Anyone who by good association can see three things combined together, the body, the proprietor of the body or the individual soul, and the friend of the individual soul, super soul, is actually in knowledge. Unless one has the association of a real knower of spiritual subjects, one cannot see these three things. Those who do not have such association are ignorant. They simply see the body and they think that when the body is destroyed, everything is finished. But actually it is not so. After the destruction of the body, both the soul and the super soul exist. And they go on eternally in many various moving and non-moving forms. The Sanskrit word Parameshvara is sometimes translated as the individual soul, because the soul is the master of the body, and after the destruction of the body he transfers to another form. In that way he is master. But there are others who interpret this Parameshvara to be the super soul. In either case, both the super soul and the individual soul continue. They are not destroyed. One who can see in this way can actually see what is happening. Yes. So, being followers of a spiritual tradition, practicing a spiritual practice, path, system, it is important to find this balance. Because we see when that balance is not there, it doesn't do any good. That's also somewhere in our instructions, that we should not disturb somebody who may be ignorant of these things, but they have their own integrity, their own desires, their own individual right to their free will. So you can't come there and say, look it, Bhagavad-gita is telling you this, now just do what Bhagavad-gita says. Krishna doesn't do that. He tells Arjuna, he gives Arjuna all these informations, all this knowledge, all these instructions, and then he says, think about it, and then you decide what you do. So that is important. But on the other hand, it's also very important that this knowledge is accessible, because if it's not accessible, we have this human form of life, and then we live, and then we die, and then we haven't taken advantage of this opportunity to actually come to the point of self-realization, come to the point where we can decide our own fate. So what are we going to do with this life, where we know that after this life the soul goes on to the next body? Because this verse isn't speaking about that, it just speaks about seeing this fact. And it's not very difficult to see that every living individual is a person with consciousness. I mean, human beings express it immediately. Little children, they immediately express their desires. If they're not happy, they just let the world know. Then we grow up, and both we become a little more sophisticated in our expression, and we also become a little more able to do something ourselves about the situation. So we're not just screaming straight out when we are not happy. We try to handle it. But certainly we all have desires. We all have a drive towards happiness, really. We want to be happy and satisfied, and we are a little bit different. We get this happiness in a little bit different ways. But ultimately, that happiness does not come from adding material elements to the material body. it's not that the eye connects with something visual, or the tongue connects with something tasty, or the ears connect with something soundy. Because beyond that, or within that, we are that living entity. We are that conscious person who has these experiences. But our nature is of a spiritual person, really. So we want to understand that. And then when we have that understanding, so yeah, we don't want to make the mistake of saying, okay, Krishna said in the Bhagavad-gita, bam, you just have to do what I tell you. Because that's what Krishna says. No, Krishna doesn't even do that. So why would we do that? But on the other hand, we don't want to just be so respectful and unintrusive that we see the whole world go by and people are going, our attention is drawn in all the different directions. And of course, many of these directions are very important. It is very important when you grow up to go to school and to find a way to support yourself and find a way to understand the society we live in and so on. But if we don't take it one step further, if we don't take it to that step, and today that's a little bit, how to say, it's not more difficult today to pick up a Bhagavad-gita and read it than it has ever been. Maybe it's even easier because it's translated to our language. We can find it distributed in every country. Basically, I think every country nowadays. So, but the culture is so flowing in a totally different direction than the general understanding of religion is that it's, either something a little silly for old people or people who are not so well situated in this world, or maybe it's a little dangerous, like these religions coming from other countries and people seem so fanatic about it, and that's the impression we have. So we have to overcome our own bias against spiritual life in order to pick up the Bhagavad-gita. But the Bhagavad-gita is here to tell us it's worth it, because being able, just a simple thing like that, which of course I cannot with my bare eyes see the soul, but I can see the symptoms of the soul. I can see that there is difference between life and death, a living person and a person who is not living. Enormous difference. Immediately you're able to ascertain this person is alive and this body here doesn't have life in it anymore. And then that must be the central thing about us, the fact that we are alive. So what does it mean? Where does it come from? How do we deal with that? That is understanding the soul. And that is something that is not actively encouraged in our culture. Our culture may have many good things to it, of course, but also many things that are maybe not be so good. But I think this is the main obstacle for a serious seeker of self-realization, is that we have to go against the grain, go against the flow. Do you say that in Swedish? You say that like a river flows in one direction. If you go the same direction, it's kind of easy. If you want to go in the other direction, you really have to work hard. And maybe you even have to, you don't even realize that it's possible because everything is moving in this one direction. So we have to wake up a little bit. And that's what Krishna is giving us, both the impetus and also the ability to do in this wonderful Bhagavad-gita. So I thank you so much for staying here with us, and I hope you will continue. We try to post these installments twice a week, but sometimes something gets in the way. But then we will be back again. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for watching. We aim for updates every Tuesday and Friday. Please come back. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them down there. We also have some links and information for you. And there is, of course, the subscribe button. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
I'm a Hare Krishna, and I approve this message. Subscribe.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,